Good afternoon, everyone. The regular meeting of the Civil Service Commission for August 6, 2025 will now come to order. Welcome in person and online attendees. If you wish to provide oral comments on any of the agenda items, please be sure to follow the instructions on the first page of the agenda. If you're attending this meeting in person and you would like to pull an agenda item for discussion, when asked, please stand and identify yourself by name or number, and we will return to your item after the consent agenda is approved. Attendees joining this meeting using the Zoom application will alert Commission staff of your intention to speak about an agenda item by using the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. Please include your name, telephone number, or other identifying feature you select when logging in. On the agenda item you want to speak about, attendees who dialed into today's meeting, please press the *9 on the telephone to raise your hand to alert Commission staff of your intention to speak about an agenda item. When called upon for you to speak, please unmute yourself using *6 on your telephone. We will now commence the order of business. The first order is roll call with Commission Secretary. Please take the roll call.
Commissioner Bassett.
Present.
Commissioner Coleman. Present. Commissioner McGovern.
Present.
Commissioner Martinello.
Present.
And Commissioner Rodriguez.
Present. Item B is a welcome item because we have been down for a number of times, for a number of months actually. I forgot how long it is, once a year. We have not had a full Civil Service Commission. So it is with great what's the word? Great pleasure. And great joy, all the positive adjectives that we can possibly describe, to welcome Laura Bassett as our newest commissioner, representing the District 5. District 5, right? You're District 5. Yes. Okay. Representing District 5, and I just want to say I've already had the pleasure of having you alongside with me at a hearing, and I'm really happy that you're joining us. I'm sure that we're going to have a lot of great conversations. Laura Bassett was born and raised in Oceanside, California, where she still resides with her husband of 32 years. She is a licensed professional fiduciary, serving as a trust and probate administrator since 2011. She's also a licensed real estate broker, specializing in residential sales and property management since 2003. Laura earned her Bachelor of Science degree in accounting from the University of Southern California in 1989. She's currently an ambassador for the Chamber of Commerce and has also been involved with the local theater community alongside her family since 2006. When not working and serving the community, she loves to spend time with her husband, her 6 grown children, and their spouses, and her granddaughter. So thank you very much for joining us, Commissioner Bassett, and we welcome you to the commission.
Yes, welcome. It's a pleasure being here and excited to contribute and be part of the process and be amongst these great people and get to know the community better as well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. And now this is great because for a while I was the only one hearing. It was a mess because on my schedule. I apologize to our staff because scheduling me is very difficult for the work. So now we will have 5 full commissioners who are hearing cases, and we will be able to do everything that we need to do. So thank you so much for Laura for joining us, Commissioner Bassett, and Commissioner McGovern, Commissioner Montenegro, and now we don't have everything on our backs. So next we have the item C, which is the approval of the minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of June 4th, 2025?
Coleman, I'll move that we approve the minutes.
A motion by Commissioner Coleman. Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a motion by Commissioner Coleman, a second by Commissioner Montenegro. Will the Commission Secretary please record Commissioner votes?
Commissioner Bassett. Approve. Commissioner Coleman. Approve. Commissioner McGovern.
Approve.
Commissioner Montenegro.
Approve.
Commissioner Rodriguez.
Aye is what we say, but yes. Yes, you did. And urgent followed, and I was like, wow, you can wait until the end until I restore order in this meeting.
New person.
That's great. I will be the bad guy, and we say aye. So that passes with all commissioners voting in the affirmative, aye, to approve the minutes. Next, we will move to non-agenda public comment. Members of the public may address any matter relating to the Civil Service Commission other than items that are on today's agenda. Total amount of time allowed for public comment will be limited to not more than 2 minutes unless the Commission President agrees to extend the time. Do any attendees want to make a public comment about any matter relating to the Civil Service Commission but not on today's agenda? If so, and you join the meeting using Zoom, please use the Q&A function on the bottom portion of the screen to inform Commission staff. If you dialed into today's meeting, you may press *9 on your telephone to raise your hand to alert Commission staff. Call upon for you to speak, please unmute yourself using *6 on your telephone. We'll need to wait a minute in the event somebody wants to make a comment and is attempting to alert staff now. For the executive officer, please start a timer.
Yes.
And then if anyone in the room wants to make a public comment that is not on the agenda, you may just, and I guess. A minute I started right there. I prefer the Jeopardy music for this. 1 minute, 30 seconds. Let's do a second on that. Okay.
Commissioners, 1 minute has passed and we've received no request to make a public comment.
All right, thank you. We will now move on to agenda item F, which is agenda item discussion. Do any of the attendees want to pull an agenda item for discussion? And if you're attending this meeting in person and you'd like to pull an agenda item for discussion, please stand and identify yourself by name and number. We will return to your item when the consent agenda is approved. If you're speaking for an appellant or complainant, please use their assigned number as opposed to their name. If you join the meeting using Zoom, please use the Q&A function at the bottom portion of the screen to inform Commission staff of the agenda item you wish to speak on. If you dialed into today's meeting, you may press *9 on your telephone to raise your hand to alert Commission staff. When called upon for you to speak, please unmute yourself using *6 on your telephone. We will need to wait a minute in the event that somebody wants to pull an agenda item and is attempting to alert Commission staff now. Will the executive officer please start the timer?
Yes. Commissioners, 1 minute has passed and we've received no request to pull an agenda item for discussion.
Thank you. Then we'll move to the formation of the consent agenda. Will the Commission Secretary announce the items forming the consent agenda?
Commissioners, agenda item 4, 5, and 6 are automatically pulled for discussion. So which leaves therefore agenda item 1 through 3 and 7 through 11 form our consent agenda.
May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion. Bassett.
There's a motion by Commissioner Bassett. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second by Commissioner Governor. Will the Commission Secretary please record Commissioner votes?
Commissioner Bassett,
Aye.
Commissioner Coleman,
Aye.
Commissioner McGovern,
Aye.
Commissioner Montenegro,
Aye.
That's right.
Commissioner Rodriguez Kennedy.
All right. Aye. Thank you.
I'm a quick study.
That's fine. All right. Well, the motion carries with all commissioners in the affirmative, so it's unanimous. We'll now go to discussion items. Agenda item 4, which is Commissioner Coleman's report on Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board yearly. Do any of the attendees want to speak about this agenda item? If so, and you join the meeting using Zoom, please use the Q&A function on the bottom portion of your screen to alert Commission staff. If you dialed into today's meeting, you may press *9 to raise your hand. To alert Commission staff, we'll need to wait a minute in the event somebody wants to speak about this agenda item and is attempting to alert staff now. The executive officer, please start the timer.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. 1 minute has passed. We received no request to speak about this agenda item.
Right, hearing none, Commissioner Vice President Coleman, if you could please continue with your.
Right, good afternoon, everyone. Deputy 1, 2024-037P, Deputy 2, and Deputy 3, deputy sheriffs, collectively referred to as deputies from this point on, appealed the findings of the Clerk Citizen Law Enforcement Review Board, in which it sustained allegations against the deputies in the Sheriff's Department. The Commission appointed me, Commissioner P.K. Coleman, to hear the appeal and submit findings of a proposed decision to the Civil Service Commission. Thereafter, a hearing was held on May 29, 2025. The Commission's authority to hear this appeal is derived from Civil Service Rule 15, Section 15.11, in that the clerk finding charges Deputy 1 with use of excessive force and misconduct for failing to utilize de-escalation techniques, Deputy 2 with use of excessive force, and Deputy 3 with misconduct for failing to provide identifying information upon request. In Section 15.1.7, it states as follows: the burden of proof shall be on clerk to demonstrate through a preponderance of the evidence that the incidents or acts which are the basis for the complaint sustained by clerk occurred and did constitute improper conduct. Summary. Clerk reviewed this case and found that on January 22nd, 2023, while driving by Richmar Park in San Marcos, Deputy 3 heard a shout coming from the park, which he interpreted as a request for assistance. Alerted by this shout from the park, Deputy 3 pulled over and initiated an investigation. Deputy 3 immediately observed 2 adult males engaged in an argument. In order to gain control of the situation, Deputy 3 used his radio to call in an active 415 between 2 adult males, then attempted to speak with both of the individuals involved. The person who alerted Deputy 3 of the confrontation, person 1, was contacted by Deputy 3 along with the other individual involved, person 2. From the start, person 1 was uncooperative, pacing back and forth, yelling over Deputy 3, and seemed agitated. Within 25 seconds of Deputy 3's initial contact, person 1 asked Deputy 3, "What's your name? Identify your effing self, man." Deputy 3 paused for approximately 1 second while person 1 was pacing and talking loud and rapidly, and never answered. Deputy 3 continued to seek person 1's cooperation to find out what was going on between him and person 2. And person 1 would not answer questions or allow Deputy 3 the chance to de-escalate the situation. It appeared to Deputy 3 that person 1 might be under the influence of a controlled substance. During the initial 48 seconds, Deputy 3 remained calm and stated to both person 1 and person 2 to sit down so we could figure out what's going on. At 48 seconds from when he initiated the contact, Deputy 3 told both person 1 and person 2 I can't deal with both of you talking at the same time. If one of you wants to come talk, ... By this time, person one had walked away, still angry and talking loudly. Just over 1 minute had passed since Deputy 3's arrival, and person one was seen picking up a basketball and returning toward Deputy 3 and person 2, switching the basketball from his left to right hand when he stopped to re-engage with person 2. At 1 minute and 11 seconds following his arrival, Deputy 3 called in to dispatch reporting, "I've got an active 415 going on." At approximately 1 minute and 45 seconds after Deputy 3's arrival, person 1 again walked away, while Deputy 3 told person 2, "I'm not going to mess with him. What's up with you?" Less than 15 seconds later, person 1 returned to where Deputy 3 and person 2 were standing, continuing his rant the whole time. It was at this point, within 45 seconds of Deputy 3's call to dispatch, Deputy 1 arrived on the scene and, after asking Deputy 3 what happened, confronted person 1, immediately ordering person 1 to sit down or you're going to get tased. Then a third order to sit down. At that point, Deputy 1 transferred his conducted energy device, CED, commonly referred to as a taser, from his left to his right hand. After Deputy 1 again ordered person 1 to sit down, person 1 replied, "Hell no, dog," while turning around and flexing his biceps as he walked away from Deputy 1 and Deputy 3. Deputy 1, with his CED in his right hand, then followed person 1 away from Deputy 3 toward basketball courts located in the park. At approximately 2 minutes and 20 seconds after Deputy 3 first made contact with person 1 and person 2, Deputy 2 arrives, joins Deputy 1 in following person 1 to the basketball court. Deputy 1 continued to order person 1 to get on the ground, adding, "or you're going to get tased." Deputy 2 was positioned at approximately 90-degree angle from Deputy 1, with person 1 at the center of the compass. Person 1 still refused to comply, shooting the basketball once, and after getting the rebound, bouncing the basketball. For a brief moment, person 1 appeared to comply with the commands to get on the ground, lowering himself cross-legged when he places his left hand on the ground, and then suddenly pushes himself back up. At this point, Deputy 1 commands him to get on the ground on your stomach. When person 1 stands up quickly, Deputy 1 shouts, "Get down on the ground now." Person 1 continues to ignore the commands and yells at Deputy 1, "Identify yourself," to which Deputy 1 states, "Officer," and his name is submitted. Deputy 1 and Deputy 2 begin circling person 1 135 to 180 degrees from one another. Person 1 again asks the officers to identify themselves, and Deputy 1 replies that he already did, and Deputy 2 replies, "We're deputy sheriffs." Person 1 then shoots the basketball, and as Deputy 1 got closer, person 1 stiffens up, raising his arms away from his body, standing more erect, and lifting his head up slowly. Then slowly turning to face Deputy 1, stating, "Do what you're going to do, bitch. Go ahead." Deputy 1 raises his CED, then discharges it toward person 1, but it failed to work. Still standing and facing Deputy 1, person 1 began to slightly shuffle his feet when Deputy 2 discharged his CED, which was effective in stopping person 1's movements. So he dropped to the ground and onto his back. Both Deputy 1 and Deputy 2 then rushed in to take control of person 1 as he lay on the ground. Only 1 second separated the discharge of the CEDs by the 2 deputies. Person 1 later filed a complaint with the clerk, which investigated the complaint and determined that some allegation result in a violations of policies of the San Diego Sheriff's Department, SDSO, or department in this report. San Diego County Sheriff's Department Policy and Procedure, P&P, Section 2.20, Identification, which provides in part, while on duty, all sworn employees shall furnish their first and last name or RGIS number to any person requesting his or her identity, except when the withholding of such information is necessary for the performance of police duties. PMP Section 2.49, Use of Force, which provides employees shall not use more force in any situation than is reasonably necessary under the circumstances. Employees shall use force in accordance with law and established departmental procedures and report all use of force in writing. Section 2.49 is further supplemented by Addendum F. Addendum F provides that deputies may use objectively reasonable force to effect an arrest of a person that the deputies have reasonable cause to believe that the person has committed a public offense, to prevent escape, or to overcome resistance. Addendum F states that deputies may only use a level of force they reasonably believe is proportional to the seriousness of the suspected offense or the reasonably perceived level of actual or threatened assistance. Addendum F also provides guidance on the use of de-escalation tactics with the goal to gain voluntary compliance of subjects when feasible and or to potentially reduce or eliminate the need to use force on a subject. CLRB sustained findings. CLRB has evaluated the complaint and determined that Deputy 3 violated PMP Section 2.20 by failing to identify himself with his first and last name or ARGIS number when Person 1 had asked them to identify themselves. CLRB determined that Deputies 1 and 2 both violated PMP Section 2.49 and Addendum F by using excessive force. Finally, CLRB determined the conduct of Deputy 1 from his arrival to his discharge of his CED is inconsistent with the de-escalation guidance set forth in Addendum F. Our findings. Deputy 1, excessive force. It is important to note that Person 1 was given many opportunities to cooperate with the commands given to him to get on the ground from each of the deputies. Deputy 1 ultimately discharged his CED directed at Person 1 while on the basketball court. While it malfunctioned in its operation or wasn't aimed yet to have both probes land on the body, it remains that it is defined as use of force. In determining whether there was excessive use of force, it is conceded that the use of a CED is considered less than lethal force. Immediately prior to the point that Deputy 1 discharged his CED, Person 1 was for the first time in this entire event quiet and standing in place, but then he straightened his body up, puffed up his chest, jutted his chin out, and stared down Deputy 1. These behaviors could be interpreted as preparing for an assault on Deputy 1, particularly when it was clear that at that time Deputy 1 was attempting to reholster his CED while continuing his commands. Person 1's change in demeanor was sudden, not reflective of a concession that it was time to end his resistance and comply with the commands to sit or get down. Rather, it was if he was going to take a final stand. Finally, when given a chance to sit and cooperate, Person 1 lowered himself toward the ground, reversed himself, continued his ranting, and when Deputy 1 attempted to reholster his CED, Person 1 suddenly changed his demeanor to one of a threat with the stiffening of his body, puffing out his chest, sticking out his jaw, turning his head quickly to face Deputy 1, then making a slight movement in Deputy 1's direction with his feet while telling him, do what you're going to do, bitch, go ahead. Objectively, Deputy 1 reasonably believed that the use of the CED at that point was necessary. Therefore, CLRB failed to meet its burden that Deputy 1 used excessive force. Deputy 1 failure to de-escalate. While it can be argued, as Deputy 1 has, that under the totality of the circumstances, his efforts to seek the cooperation of Person 1 through potential de-escalation tactics, e.g., following him to the basketball court from a distance, continuing to shout commands from a distance, providing warning of the possible use of his CED, and even reholstering his CED just prior to Person 1's final act of defiance, could have worked It is his initial conduct when arriving upon the scene that is most concerning. Deputy 1's initial encounter and his initial tactics did not de-escalate the situation with person 1, who continued his pacing, swearing, shouting, verbal attacks on the deputies. Therefore, clerk has met its burden to prove that Deputy 1 did fail to de-escalate the situation. Deputy 2, excessive force. Deputy 2 only discharged his CED once Deputy 1's CED failed due to only one barb hitting person 1. And person 1, likely realizing that, shuffled his feet, which could reasonably be interpreted as the start of a movement after the CED failed in its purpose. Deputy 1 was too close to avoid any attack that might have come from person 1, and as his cover, Deputy 2 acted appropriately. Therefore, a clerk's finding that Deputy 2's use of his CED was excessive force is not supported by the evidence, and his actions are justified. Deputy 3, failure to identify self. Deputy 3 agrees that shortly after his arrival, while he was attempting to determine why person 1 had called out to him as he drove by, person 1 asked for his name. It is clear, and Deputy 3 does not dispute, that he did not provide his name when requested. Deputy 3 testified that he took a quick pause, to make a decision whether to respond, but felt to do so would give control of the scene to person 1. He added that it was a conscious decision because he himself did not have control and person 1 was erratic and pacing back and forth. The mandate that on-duty sworn employees must furnish their name upon request from any person has an exception, which is when the withholding of such information is necessary for the performance of police duties. Deputy 3 did not articulate why withholding his name was necessary for the performance of police duties, although he did explain he didn't have control of the situation at that time, and that he didn't want person 1 to gain control over the scene by providing his name. Clerk has met his burden of proof that Deputy 3 did not identify himself to person 1 in violation of P&P Section 2.20. Recommendations. Based on the findings set forth, I hereby recommend the following decision. 1, that the allegations sustained by clerk in the complaint against Deputy 1 referred to as clerk case number 23-071 regarding excessive force be deemed not sustained. 2, that the allegations sustained by clerk in the complaint against Deputy 1 referred to as clerk case 23-071 regarding misconduct failed to utilize de-escalation techniques be deemed sustained. 3, that the allegations sustained by clerk in the complaint against Deputy 2 referred to as clerk case number 23-071 regarding excessive force be deemed action justified. 4, that the allegations sustained by clerk in the complaint against Deputy 3 referred to as clerk case number 23-071 regarding misconduct failed to provide identifying information upon request be deemed sustained, and that this proposed decision shall become effective upon the date of approval by the Civil Service Commission, and I so move.
Do we have
Second, a motion.
there's a motion by Commissioner Coleman and a second by Commissioner Montenegro. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, will the Commissioner Secretary please record Commissioner votes?
Commissioner Bassett,
Aye.
Commissioner Coleman,
Aye.
Commissioner McGovern,
Aye.
Commissioner Montenegro,
Aye.
Commissioner Rodriguez Kennedy.
Aye. That carries with a unanimous vote. We'll now move on to agenda item 5, which is Commissioner Montenegro's report on the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board Appeal hearing. Does any of the attendees want to speak about this agenda item? If so, when you join the meeting using Zoom, please use the Q&A function on the bottom portion of the screen to alert Commission staff. If you dialed into today's meeting, you may press *9. to raise your hand to alert commission staff. We'll need to wait a minute in the event that somebody wants to speak about this agenda item. I'm just attempting to alert commission staff now. Will the executive officer please start the timer?
Yes. One minute has passed. We've received no requests to speak about this agenda item.
All right, hearing none, Commissioner Montenegro, if you would please proceed with your report.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Right. Officer 1, 2024-040C, and Officer 2, 2024-041E. Probation officers, collectively referred to as officers, appealed the finding of the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board, CLERB, in which it sustained allegations against officers in the probation department. The commission appointed me, Commissioner Joe O. Montenegro, to hear the appeal, submit the finding and a proposed decision to the Civil Service Commission. Thereafter, a hearing was held on June 2nd, 2025. Commission's authority to hear this appeal is derived from Civil Service Rule 15, Section 15-1-1, in that the clerk finding charges Officer 1 and Officer 2 used excessive force against a youth housed at the Youth Transition Campus. Section 15.1.7 states as follows: the burden of proof shall be on clerk to demonstrate through a preponderance of the evidence that the incident or acts which are the basis for the complaint sustained by clerk occurred and did constitute improper conduct. In summary, clerk reviewed this case and found that on August 12, 2023, during the dinner time at a cottage known as Cottage Succeed at the Youth Transition Campus or facility, Officers 1 and Officers 2, along with one other probation officer, Officer 3, were supervising 12 male youth in the day room setting. While the youth were eating dinner, the probation officers allowed the youth to watch television mounted on one end of the walls during dinner time, and the television was on the channel showing the Padre baseball game being broadcast at the time. At all times pertinent to this incident, Officers 1 and Officer 3 were standing near two desks within or immediately adjacent to a smaller alcove where the desks are located, along with office equipment such as telephone, computer terminals, a printer, binders, etc. The desk immediately adjacent has one corner abutting the alcove wall and is positioned at a 45-degree angle off the corner of the alcove. Both Officer 1 and Officer 3 positioned rolling desk chairs in front of themselves. Officer 2 was located close by with his back to the wall that is parallel to the wall at the further end of the day room where the second television is located. One of the youths finished his dinner, stood up, asked for permission, received permission to throw out the disposable dinner containers and utensils, and after being given permission, left his table and threw away his dinner trash. Youth then continued walking to the television and without asking permission, turned on an attached video gaming system that caused the television in the larger alcove to automatically change the input source away from the live television feed of the baseball game. Youth then sat down in a chair in front of the screen to play a video game. Officer 1, having observed the youth turn on the video game, reached to a desk located to his right, opened a drawer, pulled out a remote control for the television, and turned the television off from across the room. The youth then got out of his chair, stood on a small table where the gaming device was housed, and manually pushed the power button for the television without permission. Officer 1 then again used the remote control to turn the television off from across the room. The youth then got up from his chair, stated, "This is my TV. I can do what I want," and proceeded to walk with a deliberate stride, grasping his waistband with his right hand across the day room and confronted Officer 3. He argued that he had the right to use the television, yelling profanities towards the officer. Officer 1 told the youth that it was he who turned it off. The youth then moved to Officer 1, continued to yell profanities, and argue with Officer 1. By arguing with Officer 1, the youth made the comment, "This is my house, and you're going to find out. Crack it off." The phrase "crack it off" is a slang term for an assault on an officer. Officer 1 had a desk chair in front of himself, but off to his left with his left foot resting on top of the base and with his left hand on top of the chair back. Approximately 19 seconds into his argument with Officer 1, at least 8 of the other youths were now watching the argument. 18 seconds later, Officer 1 takes his left foot off the base of the desk chair, stepping back and squaring his feet with his body, but with his left hand remaining on top of the back of the chair. The action created more space between him and the youth. 6 seconds later, the youth stepped forward within less than 2 feet between them, and then 1 second later, he takes another step to within 4 or 5 inches away from Officer 1. Officer 1 testified that he continued efforts to de-escalate the situation. During much of the time that he was standing in front of and arguing with Officer 1, the youth had one or both hands shoved into his waistband and kept them there until he and Officer 1 entered into a fight. Officer 1's initial movement was to place the palm of his left hand on the youth's chest and to swing his right hand toward the youth's left shoulder. The youth's initial movement was to pull his right hand out of his waistband, swinging his right fist towards Officer 1's body and ducking from Officer 1's right hand. Once the fight began, Officer 1 pushed the chair away towards Officer 2. Officer 3, who had been watching the argument closely for the past 7 seconds, moved towards the fight, and Officer 2, who had been watching the youth and Officer 1, grabbed the chair and moved it out of the way, while at the same time he joined Officer 1 in wrestling the youth to the ground. In an effort to subdue and control the youth, Officer 3 is seen following the 3 combatants, motioning to the other youth in what appears to be his command to cover. It is clear that the cover command was no later than 7 seconds after the fight began, as by this time all 11 of the remaining youth had complied to the command. While Officer 1 and Officer 2 worked to gain control of the youth, who was on his stomach with his arms tucked close to his body, with his right hand up around his head and face, Officer 3 remained alert as cover. In his efforts to gain control, Officer 1 first placed pressure on the side of the youth's head, while at the same time using his body and his left arm to try and gain control of the youth's arms. To do so, Officer 1 applied 2 knee kicks to the youth's right torso. Officer 3 then moved to the youth's feet and grabbed him, spreading him apart to prevent body twisting on the part of the youth. Policies. San Diego County Probation Department Institutional Service Policy Manual, Policy 514, Section 514.3, Use of Force, which provides in pertinent parts. Officers may use force as reasonably appears necessary in the performance of their duties, but excessive force shall not be used. Officers must use only the amount of force that appears reasonably necessary under the circumstances in order to gain control of the youth. Protect and ensure the safety of youth, staff, and others. Obtain compliance with facility rules and staff orders, or ensure that the institutional security and good order. Section 514.3 further provides in its 5th paragraph, Prior to resorting to the use of force, officers should, when practical, attempt verbal persuasion, order, or other tactics to avoid or mitigate the need for forceful action. Citing to California Code of Regulations, Title 15, Section 1357. Subsection 514.3.1 provides 20 examples of factors to be used to determine the reasonableness of force. Some of these factors relate to factors set forth in Penal Code Section 835A. Clerk evaluated the complaint and determined that officers 1 and 2 both violated policy manual sections 514 by using excessive force in their efforts to control the youth when he engaged in a fight with Officer 1 after continuing argued with Officer 1 about changing the input to the television without permission. Clerk's determination also includes the action on the part of Officer 1 when he attempted to gain physical control of the youth in attempting an inside head takedown, as the two were arguing, implying that the officer's 1 use of force initially was unnecessary and excessive. Findings: excessive force for Officer 1. The youth was a resident at Cottage Succeed at the facility on the date of the incident where Officer 1 and Officer 3 were assigned. Cottage Succeed is described as housing for the most violent of juveniles, where the most serious of youths are housed. Youth had a known history of challenging authority both in and out of the facility. On the day of the incident, the youth had already stated to one officer, "What's bracking?" Where the term bracking is gang slogan is the challenge to fight. On or around that day, a routine weekly inspection of his room resulted in the discovery of a journal in the youth journal, where he wrote, "The only thing that would make me smile is if I kill an officer." Having been rebuffed twice in his efforts to take control of the television without permission, the youth then walked across the room to confront Officers 3 and Officers 1. He didn't ask for permission to approach, and his demeanor was such that it was clearly a likely confrontation would follow. The youth did not like that he was told no, confronting Officer 1, shoving his hands into his waistband, yelling and arguing with the officer, and then stepping closer when the Officer 1 made a slight step back to create some distance. Finally, the youth shuffled even closer to within approximately 5 inches of Deputy 1, continuing his arguing and flinched when Deputy 1 moved to restrain the youth with an inside head takedown. Clerk believes that the de-escalation efforts were not sufficient to avoid the confrontation, pointing out that Officer 1 could easily have taken a step or steps back away from the youth to give space between himself and the youth, and that Officer 1 did not do so. But to do so would only embolden the youth, who are challenging the authority of the officers, which could lead to even worse consequences. As pointed out by an expert witness, Officer 1 had no obligation to retreat, and Penal Code Section 835D recognizes that there is no such obligation, but subdivision D does not equate repositioning or other descaling tactics to retreating. The clerk points out that there is an inconsistency with Officer 1's statement that he thought stepping back again was not possible due to the location of the nearby desk. The CCTV video showed that the desk was not directly behind Officer 1, but instead was to his right, almost 2 feet away from him. Officer 1 maintained that at the time he thought that his position was such that the desk would impede additional movement back. Finally, clerk goes to length to question whether Officer 1 used the cover command prior to the physical effort to take the youth under control, and why it is unclear from the CCTV video recording, as there is no audio element to the recording. There is no evidence other than the timing of compliance for the cover command when Officer 1, Officer 2, and the youth were wrestling on the floor. Even then, the other youths were more interested in watching and not covering right away. and they didn't comply, the officer 3 points to the youth and appears to addressing them to cover. After clerk considered the staff recommendation the first time, it directed staff to go back and try to obtain interviews with Officer 1 and Officer 2 to try and clear up the inconsistencies it saw between statements and the video. Officers 1 and Officers 2 declined the request by clerk staff to be interviewed, and it returned to clerk with a recommendation that clerk approve a finding of not sustained, meaning there was insufficient evidence to either prove or disprove the allegations. Clerk did not agree with the recommendation and made changes to the finding as identified above. It is the finding of the hearing officer that the use of force of Officer 1 was justified, and that the issue of whether Officer 1 gave the cover command prior to his efforts to take you under control using force is not sustained by the evidence. Therefore, the finding of clerk that Officer 1 used excessive force is overturned. Excessive force, Officer 2. Officer 2 was not involved in the argument that the youth had with Officer 1 and Officer 3. His only involvement is that when the argument turned physical with Officer 1 and the youth fighting, that he jumped in to assist Officer 1 in seeking to control the youth. The expert witness analysis and opinion of the fight supports Officers 2's use of force on the youth as efforts to take him into custody and control the situation. The strikes, if any, delivered by Officer 2 to the youth body were textbook examples of how to gain control of a fighting youth. Likewise, using his hand or arm to press the youth's head to the floor are all within policy 514, and clerk has not met its burden of proof, the burden to support its finding that he used excessive force. Therefore, his actions are justified. As with Officer 1, the finding of clerk that Officer 2 used excessive force is overturned. Based on the findings set forth above, I hereby recommend the following decisions. That the allegations sustained by clerk in the complaint against Officer 1, referred to as clerk case 23-118, regarding excessive force be deemed action justified. That the allegations sustained by clerk in the complaint against Officer 2, referred to as clerk case 23-118, regarding excessive force be deemed action justified. And that the proposed decision shall become effective upon the date of approval by the Civil Service Commission, and I so move.
Right. And then, do we have a second?
Second.
There's a motion by Commissioner Montenegro and a second by Commissioner McGovern. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the Commissioner Secretary please record Commissioner votes?
Commissioner Bassett,
Aye.
Commissioner Coleman,
Aye.
Commissioner McGovern,
Right?
Commissioner Montenegro,
Aye.
Commissioner Rodriguez-Kennedy.
Aye. The recommendation carries unanimously with all commissioners voting in favor. Now move on to agenda item 6, which is my report on the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board appeal hearing. Do any of the attendees want to speak about this agenda item? If so, and you join the meeting using Zoom, please use the Q&A function on the bottom portion of the screen to alert commission staff. If you dialed into today's meeting, you may press *9 to raise your hand to alert commission staff. You'll need to wait a minute in the event somebody wants to speak about this agenda item and is attempting to alert staff now. Will the executive officer please start time?
Yes. Has passed. We're receiving no requests to speak about this agenda item.
Hearing none, Commissioner Vice President Coleman, would you please chair this portion of the meeting as I read my report?
Yes, please proceed with your verification of the security.
All right. W1-2023-050P, and W2-2023-051P, deputy sheriffs collectively referred to as deputies, appealed the findings of the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board clerk, in which it sustained allegations against deputies in the sheriff's department. The commission appointed me, Commissioner Rodriguez Kennedy, to hear the appeals and the findings and those decisions of the Civil Service Commission. Therefore, a hearing was held on June 11, 2025. Commission's authority to hear this appeal is derived from Civil Service Rule 15, Section 15.1.1G. In that the clerk finding charges deputies. In that the clerk findings charges deputies as follows: illegal search and seizure, Deputy 1 and Deputy 2, forced entry into the restrained person's residence. Section 15.1.7 states as follows: the burden of proof shall be on the clerk to demonstrate through a preponderance of the evidence that the incident or act which was the basis for the complaint sustained by clerk occurred and did constitute improper conduct. Summary. Clerk reviewed this case and found that Deputy 1 and Deputy 2 committed misconduct in the procedures that they followed to serve a domestic violence temporary restraining order (TRO) with an order for removal issued by the Superior Court upon the restraining person on February 1st, 2022, at an apartment we'll call the residence. Clerk accepted jurisdiction on the basis that the San Diego Sheriff's Office forwarded the incident due to the fact that at one point after leaving, the restrained person returned to the apartment and attempted to prevent the deputies from re-entering, resulting in force to gain entry and enforce the order. And 2, the restrained person required medical treatment for a broken digitus minimus manus, commonly referred to as a pinky finger, on his right hand, at its top knuckle, which he suffered in his struggle with the deputies. The deputies first arrived at the residence on February 1st, 2022. Deputy 2 knocked on the door, paused, and then shouted, "Sheriff's Department." After pause, repeated, "Sheriff's Department," and hearing a voice from within added, "Can you come to the door, please?" The restrained person opened the door approximately 4 inches. The Deputy 1 and Deputy 1 asked, "Can we come in, please?" Deputy 1 then confirmed that the person at the door was the restrained person and told him, "We have some paperwork for you." Okay. The restrained person opened the door a bit wider and reached out to the door with his right hand, indicating he wanted to receive the paperwork from Deputy 1. Deputy 1 then placed his fingertips on the door, saying to the restrained person, "Open the door for me." The restrained person raised his fingers up as if to indicate that they needed to remain outside, saying, "You can't come in." To which Deputy 2 replied, "Yes, we can." Deputy 1 also repeated, "Open the door." At all times, the restrained person's left hand remained behind the door, not visible to the deputies. The restrained person then allowed the deputies to enter, at which point Deputy 1 further elaborated on the nature of their visit as he went through the TRO and order page by page. Except when initially announcing their arrival through the closed door, at no other point were voices raised as Deputy 1 explained the purpose of their visit. The restrained person remained uncertain of the legitimacy of the presence of the deputies, and they allowed him to call 911 to confirm to the dispatch that they were, in fact, to serve him with papers. After going through the TRO and order, the restrained person seemed reluctant to leave the residence, and Deputy 1 told him that there were 2 options. One is, you can stay here, and we'll force you out, put you in handcuffs, and take you to jail. Or 2, you abide by the court order, which is temporary, get your stuff, and just move out. After the restrained person continued to try to indicate that he wanted to stay at the residence, Deputy 2 pointed out that a violation of the terms and stipulations of the TRO and order is an arrestable offense, and he agreed to collect his belongings and leave. The restrained person still stated that the deputies could leave, but was informed that they needed to stay while he gathered his things and leaves, and that they would hand over the paperwork once he leaves the evening. As the restrained person gathered his belongings, he appeared to be collecting everything of his to take. Deputy 1 explained to him that it was only temporary and that he just needed to take everything. That if he needed to return for something that he needed during the pendency of the order, that he could call the San Diego Police Department and tell them he needs to preserve the peace to assist in picking up more belongings. Well, 15 minutes after he began collecting belongings, The restrained person steps out of the front door of the residence, and when he turns to return inside, Deputy 1 blocks his entry, telling him, "You're out, you're out. You're not getting your bike. That's it, you're out." There were some personal belongings outside the door that the restrained person was unable to carry while holding a bundle of clothes. Deputy 1 followed the restrained person as he walked along the common balcony and walkway towards his car. He then stops, turns around, walks past Deputy 1, and walks back towards the residence to retrieve a trash bag from his neighbor to hold his clothes and make it easier to carry. Deputy 1 also takes a trash bag from the neighbor. Walking past Deputy 2, restrained person is now in front of both deputies and increases his pace so that he's made some distance from Deputy 2. By the time he reaches the front door of the residence, Deputy 2 speeds up a bit when she sees that the restraining order re-entered the residence and attempts to shut the door on the deputy. Deputy 2 places her foot across the threshold and stops the door from closing, pushing with her hands to get back in as the restrained person is now in violation of the TRO and order. After Deputy 1 and Deputy 2 regain entry into the residence, they quickly act to arrest the restrained person for violating the TRO and the order. Resisting the arrest, the three wrestle around the residence, ending up in the bathroom, where the deputies were finally able to get handcuffs on it. 2 minutes and 9 seconds after the deputies forced their way back in, San Diego police showed up. Medical assistance is called when the restrained person complains of the injury to his hand. Policies. All parties agree that the San Diego County Sheriff's Department deputies are bound by the San Diego County Sheriff's Department Court Services Bureau Policy and Procedures Manual number D.3, order for removal. Clerk jurisdiction and sustaining claims. Initially, the deputies argued that clerk lacked jurisdiction from the start, contending that it never should have investigated the events that occurred on February 1st, 2022. Since no complaint was ever filed, the department regularly forwards all cases where use of force is reported, and arguing that without such a complaint, and because the restrained person's injury was a broken pinky finger, the arrestee, the restrained person, did not suffer a quote grave bodily injury. Clerk argues that first, the commission does not have the authority to resolve the question in clerk's jurisdiction to review, investigate, and report on any complaints submitted to clerk. And second, the clerk is required to review, investigate, and report on any incident involving county law enforcement where, inter alia, there is a use of force that resulted in quote grave bodily injury. Second, in addition to the jurisdictional question, clerk, as a result of investigating the use of force, but without a complaint from the restrained person, reviewed, investigated, and reported on the factual circumstances relating to deputies' initial actions to gain entry to the residence. This resulted in a finding that their entry was non-consensual, and clerk sustained a finding of misconduct for violation of San Diego County Sheriff's Department Court Services Bureau Policy and Procedures Manual number D.3, order for removal. Findings: use of force resulting in grave bodily injury. It is agreed that this commission does not have the authority to determine the jurisdiction of clerk. However, this commission is allowed to evaluate the findings and conclusions of clerk if appealed by a county employee under Rule 15. This palette of review is limited to reviewing a quote sustaining complaint that a peace officer committed or engaged in 9 specifically described conduct included at section 15.1.1. In the instant action, clerk found that the deputies. This is supposed to be initial. So in initial action, clerk found that the deputy's use of force was justified. The question is, can the restrained person's injuries, the fracture of the top knuckle of his right pinky finger, meet the defined definition of grave bodily injury, supporting quote action justified by clerk? Our answer under these facts would be yes. Initial entry 2. The initial entry into restrained person's residence was not a forced entry. Even though there is the argument that clerk should not have considered the charge, since it normally wouldn't be within its jurisdiction without a quote complaint, we respect the board and the work that they perform, and will consider this a Rule 15 appeal. As the alleged misconduct occurred during an incident which fell within clerk's jurisdiction pursuant to clerk's rules and regulations, section 4.3, which lay out specific incidents which clerk may quote review, investigate, and report on the following categories of incidents, regardless of whether a complaint has been filed, and C, the use of force by peace officers or custodial officers employed by the County Sheriff's Department or custodial officers employed by the County Sheriff's Department or the probationary department resulting in grave bodily injury. In considering the body-worn camera of the initial entry into the restrained person's residence, it is clear that the restrained person briefly hesitated in allowing the deputy's entry. His residence, if any, resistance, if any, was brief. And after the explanation provided by Deputy 1 and Deputy 2, after the explanation was provided by Deputy 1 or Deputy 2, he did not oppose their entry. Deputy 1 and his fingertips on the door, had his fingertips on the door. Had restrained person truly opposed their entry, he could have provided more resistance against Deputy 1's fingers, so that the deputies would have needed to resort to forced entry by other means. Further, at the time of this entry, the restrained person is the individual who opened the door, allowing the deputies to enter. This wasn't a situation where the door was closed but not locked, and the deputies, finding the door unlocked, turned the doorknob and opened the door. Therefore, the initial entry into the residence was not a forcible entry. Three, the injury in question occurred in a second entry, which was lawful and compliant with relevant law. The restrained person did not sustain an injury during the initial entry, but rather as a result of a second entry. This entry occurred after the deputies served the restrained person, the DVTRO, and after the deputies had escorted the restrained person out of the residence. At this point, the restrained person had been identified. The purpose of the deputy's visit had been explained, and the unlawfulness of his return to the residence had been explained as well. And the restrained person decided to violate the order and return to the residence while attempting to prevent the deputies from entering while he was in the active commission of a crime, violation of Penal Code 273.6. Penal Code Section 844, which reads, to make an arrest of a private person if the offense is a felony, and in all cases, a peace officer may break open the door or window of the house in which the person to be arrested is, or in which they have reasonable grounds for believing the person to be, after having demanded admittance and explained the purpose for which admittance is desired. Thus, this second entry was lawful and compliant with department policy. Finally, the Commission finds that clerk's evidence does not indicate a violation of department policy or relevant law, as the injury in question occurred during a second entry and all conditions of Penal Code 844 had been met, and thus a forced entry was lawful and compliant with policy. Therefore, the evidence supports finding of unfounded on the part of Deputy 1 and Deputy 2. Based on the findings and set forth above, I hereby recommend the following decision. The allegations sustained by clerk against Deputy 1 and Deputy 2 related to a forced entry into a restrained person's residence referred to as clerk case 22-2027 be deemed unfounded, and that this proposed decision shall become effective upon the date of approval by the Civil Service Commission, and I so move.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the Commission Secretary please record Commissioner votes?
Commissioner Bassett,
Aye.
Commissioner Coleman,
Aye.
Commissioner McGovern, Commissioner Montenegro.
Aye.
Commissioner Rodriguez Kennedy.
Unanimous. Back to you.
All right, so I believe we are at the end, which means that we conclude today's meeting. Thank you for attending. The next commission meeting is scheduled for September 3rd, 2025. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.